So welcome everybody to the Mineral Assessment Hub Annual AHR Forum. My name's Warren Cooper and I'm currently acting in the role of Regional Director, Mineral Operations based here in Townsville in the Mineral Hub. And today I'll be chairing the forum and introducing the presenters. The aim of the forum is to inform AHR and other tenure managers of changes to resource legislation or to provide updates from different divisions within Georesources. While we look forward to having this forum in a more face-to-face format going forward, what we've found is the ability to deliver information using Teams has been demonstrated to be very effective, and I thank the Mineral Hub team members who have facilitated this forum for their efforts. The program for the forum is there on the screen, and I believe it was also attached to the invites. And what we'd like to do is start for a welcome to country, followed by presentations on these topics. I'll introduce each presenter and speaker as we progress, and at the end there'll be hopefully time to answer any questions led by myself and Darren Moor, Executive Director, Mineral and Coal. And we're quite fortunate to have Darren making himself available for this event. While the forum is led by the Mineral Hub, topics being presented may capture a number of tenure types and be relevant for other commodities like coal, petroleum and small-scale mining. Just first of all, a bit of housekeeping for this forum. If I can ask that people remember to mute your microphones unless you're speaking. Questions, should you have any, we would like you to place them into the chat. And that way we can capture all of these questions, and if there's time at the end we'll certainly try to address them, but should we be running out of time we will capture all of those questions and provide a response that will be uploaded along with this presentation as it's being recorded. The next page, yes. Before we start, I'd like to invite Carlye to give an acknowledgement to country. Carlye has been with the department for 3 years now, having commenced employment at the Mineral Assessment Hub in Townsville through an Indigenous employment initiative. She has worked across the exploration, production and customer services teams. Carlye is passionate about women's rugby league and she plays in the second row for the Townsville Western Lions. Thank you, Carlye.
Kapo Bailut Batanga, Nitamunkumura National, Carlye. Good morning, everyone. My name is Carlye. This morning, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land in Townsville where I'm based, the Wulkurukaba and Bindal people, and pay respects to the elders, past, present, and emerging across Queensland. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlye. Our first presenter is Rebecca Thompson. Beck is based in the Queensland office where her current focus is in the assessment of applications for the grant of mining claims and mineral mining leases. Her area of expertise is in the small-scale mining activity. Beck has worked within the Mineral Assessment Hub for 3.5 years, and prior to that she worked in local government administration for 18 years. Beck is married with one beautiful daughter who is away at boarding school. So Beck gets to spend all her time looking after the family horses and attending polo cross carnivals. Thank you, Beck.
Thanks, Warren. Good morning, everyone. On the 25th of October 2018 saw the implementation of the Mineral, Water and Other Legislation Amendment Act of 2018, also known as MWOLA. The implementation of MWOLA changed a few things. It saw changes to the referral requirements for compensation agreements. The Department of Resources automatically referral of unresolved compensation matters to land court ceased, and any application or renewal lodged after the 25th of October 2018 has become the responsibility of the applicant, holder or landholder to refer all unresolved compensation matters to land court. Sorry, there's slight delays. As the department is no longer able to refer unresolved compensation, the Mineral Assessment Hub processes for addressing overdue compensation agreements are as follows. The Mineral Assessment Hub staff will first make contact with you to advise of the outstanding compensation requirements. If the matters remain outstanding, a formal notice will be issued in accordance with Section 386L of the MR Act, and a failure to respond or action the requirements may result in the application or renewal being rejected or refused. There are provisions under the MR Act 1989 which allow the Minister to refuse a mining claim or mining lease application or renewal. These sections can be found for mining claims under Section 85 of the MRA Act and for mining leases under Section 279 of the MR Act. Apologise, the slideshow is not cooperating. Some time frames for which compensation is required to be referred if compensation agreements can be met are as follows. For new applications, be it a mining lease or a mining claim, the time frame in which a compensation is required to be lodged is if 3 months have passed since the objection period has closed. And for renewals, it is 3 months after the tenure's expiry date. If a compensation agreement cannot be negotiated within the required timeframes, either the applicant, the holder, or the landholder can make the referral to Land Court. There are several options available should this need arise. The first option recommended by the Land Court is the alternative dispute resolution, then progress to mediation, and the last port of option available is referral of Land Court for determination. For alternative dispute resolution, the Land Court is committed to resolving disputes fairly, cost-effectively, and efficiently. Before hearing and deciding a case, the Land Court encourages all parties to try and reach agreement using their alternative dispute resolution process. An ADR process is alternative because it is an alternative to a court hearing and decision. If an agreement cannot be met through alternative dispute resolution, the next step is mediation. The mediation occurs after a case has started in the Land Court. If mediation is still unable to reach an agreement, the last step in which can be undertaken through the Land Court is where it will go to Land Court for decision and determination. Once all these should you require any further information on these processes, the Land Court have a lot of frequently asked questions and process available, and you will find any further information required within the link of this presentation once you receive it. Thank you.
Thank you, Beck. We're just going to wait for the presentation to, there we go. Coming up next, we've got Ben Hauser. Ben commenced as a cadet for the Queensland Government in January 2009, straight out of high school. He initially started out in data maintenance and creating geology maps for various areas in Queensland. Subsequently, Ben has completed 4 years of study at the Queensland University of Technology, graduating with a Bachelor of Spatial Science. For the last 7 years, Ben has been focused on the spatial requirements of resource authorities. This includes involvement in the creation, development and maintenance of Georesource Globe, as well as training others in how to make optimal use of the system. Thank you, Ben. Take it away.
Thank you, Warren. So today I'm going to be covering all the spatial requirements for an application. Hopefully, if the slideshow changes. So these are the brief outlines of what I'm going to be covering over the next 15 minutes. So coordinates, bearings and distances, the accesses, creating shapefiles in Georesources Globe, good example of a simple location diagram, and the requirements, the spatial requirements for MyMinesOnLine. Firstly, the coordinates, bearings and distances. When an application is provided to us, well, my main goal in what I do is to spatially locate where your resource authority is. There are a few requirements that we need spatially. One of those is coordinates provided in either degrees, minutes, seconds, decimal degrees or decimal minutes. Or they can also be in an easting and northing format with a zone, but they must always include a projection, whether that be the zone projection or a GDA 2020, which is the current standard, or the previous standard, which was GDA 94. They can also be provided in a bearing and distance format from a permanent survey mark, for example. And then the bearings and distances for the resource authority itself in degrees, minutes, seconds, decimal degrees and decimal minutes for the direction. And then they also must provide a distance in meters, obviously. And the area is to be provided in hectares most of the time. We do prefer hectares, but we can accommodate other ones, I suppose. Below that screenshot there is a bit of an example of what we receive, just to give you a quick example. The next slide. Accesses. So not all resource authorities require an access. For example, if a resource authority is abutting a dedicated road, it does not require one. However, that can be altered depending on a case-by-case basis. Accesses need to follow tracks, preferably on the most recent satellite imagery. They must start at a dedicated road parcel and then end at the resource authority. If possible, it also should overlap other existing areas in the accesses in the area, sorry. Below there, you can see a few examples that I have there. So the very left image is a very good example of a lot of mining claims in around the Gemfield area, around Emerald. You can see there it's got a lot of different mining claims and all their accesses align nicely on existing tracks on satellite imagery. And then an example on the very right is an area that we need to look into a little bit more to try to make it a lot nicer to rechart and to talk with the holders as to the appropriate access in that area. As you can see there, they're all a bit over the top of each other, probably not in the most logical spot, and it kind of looks a bit like spaghetti, which in a spatial system doesn't look overly nice and is probably not the most accurate either. Creating shapefiles in Georesources. So it is a pretty simple process, and this is probably where most people would create shapefiles from. As Warren said at the start, I was heavily involved in the development of Georesources, which can be accessed via that URL at the top of the screen, or you can just simply type in Georesources into Google, and that'll pop up automatically. It's a free application that anyone can use. So there are two ways of creating a shapefile in Georesources. The first one is importing a CSV file from Excel with an ID, a latitude and longitude fields in those columns as well. So once you import that CSV, it'll give you the option to import it as a point, a line, or a polygon, as well as a projection. Obviously, for this one, we're going to use a polygon example. So by clicking on the polygon and then the projection, it'll bring the shape into Georesources. From there, you can click on that shape, which will open the attribute table. And from there, you can go into the download area and then download that shape as a shapefile, setting the projection, and then downloading that to your PC into your downloads folder. This should then have the four main components of a shapefile: the DBF, the PRJ, the SHP, and the SHX files with that shapefile, which then can be used to submit into MyMinesOnLine. The second way of creating a shapefile in Georesources is on the screen. So we do have a function in there in the toolbar where you can actually draw a shape on the screen just freehand. We've got a few different versions in there of how you can draw things. We've got a rectangle, a line if you want to do an axis, or we've got a polygon feature there. So just click on the screen corners as you go along and then double click to finish. That then puts that shape into the Places window in Georesources. And then from the Places window, you can download as a shapefile again. From there, set the projection, and then that will download into your downloads folder onto your PC. Those are the two most common ways in Georesources of creating a shapefile. Or if you have a ArcMap or a GIS type software as well, obviously it can be done in there as well. Next. Sorry, there's a bit of delay in the slide transitioning. A few good examples of location diagrams, which can be quite helpful in the supporting information when you apply for a resource authority, is a good location diagram. A good location diagram should include abuttals, accesses, either surrounding your resource authority, as well as your own. Features in and around the application, like pits, trees, buildings, things like that. The coordinates of corner posts, bearing and distances of the boundary of your resource authority, and again, as well as existing works, shafts, pits, ground disturbances, rock outcrops, that type of thing. Just so that we can then give a good representation of where your application for your resource authority is. That way we don't have to come back to you with more questions. It's better to give us the correct information or a detailed description of your resource authority straight out of the box. Requirements for MyMinesOnLine. For MyMinesOnLine. So when you do submit information to MyMinesOnLine, it does require certain things. It requires the size of the resource authority, the local government area which your resource authority is in, whether it has a datum post inserted, coordinates of datum posts, when the land was marked out, the width of the access, and relevant information about the accesses. It requires information on any land that is being surrendered, restricted areas, areas within a surface area, land within unallocated state land, list of overlapping land parcels, and whether it's within a native title claim. And lastly, the final spatial requirements, which I touched on a little bit before. So it does require the 4 types of data required for a shapefile. So the DBF, the PRJ, the SHP, and the SHX file to make the shapefile work. It does need to be zipped into a compressed document because only one item can be loaded in at once, which is why we need to zip them. You need to upload the area, a surface area if it's required, and an access if it's required. Accompanied with those is the good map, the sketch of the boundary and the accesses, the coordinate documents that you might have, adjoining resource authority information, additional documents that might support your location. I mean, anything that you can send us could help. A lot of the time we get very, very little information on the location of a resource authority, which usually then means we have to go back to the holder or the applicant to find out what exactly or where exactly the resource authority is. And that is it for my section. Thank you very much. I'll be hanging around to the end to answer any questions as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. Next up, we have Xavier Horgan, Project Officer in the Mineral Assessment Hub. Xavier started with the department in 2016 as a part of the then small-scale mining hub and QGAP office in Quilpie. Following the integration of the small-scale hub with the Mineral Assessment Hub, Xavier relocated to the Townsville office in July 2021. Many of the attendees at today's forum will have had contact with Xavier in his previous capacity of managing the Mineral Hub inbox and the main phone line. His current focus is the assessment of applications for the renewal of mining claims and mineral mining leases. In his spare time, Xavier oscillates between the joys of watching NRL footy and the disappointments in his own tipping choices. Thank you, Xavier. Take it away.
Thanks for that, Warren. Morning, everyone, and welcome. I'll get straight into this as I have an allocated time slot and I don't wish to exceed that. I won't be covering entire lodgement processes, but rather specific items that the department seems to have recurring questions about. Feel free to read through the slides as I'm speaking and jot down any questions you have and we can assess them after the presentation. Thanks. If these slides change. Righto, MyMinesOnLine. The first thing that everyone should be aware of is that lodging your applications through MyMinesOnLine is the best practice. MyMinesOnLine sends prompt notifications to our assessment officers when applications are being lodged. The applicant then has the benefit of being able to track and monitor the progress of their application as it continues through the assessment process. I would also like to point out that it is important when lodging through MyMinesOnLine that you are uploading the correct information where it is requested. I find that when clients email the hub, when they cannot upload documents, it does not really solve the problem, as the information is often insufficient, or we cannot upload it from our end either. New applications for production permits. I have listed on the slide some items that we regularly follow up for additional information. This is more of a reminder that the information we are asking for is required when deciding to accept or reject an application. Incorrect or insufficient information impacts the lodgement of tenures. We encourage everyone to lodge all of their information and put their best application forward at the time of lodgement. We also recommend that EA applications are lodged as soon as numbers are issued, and financial and technical information is a really important one because it's required for us to complete our technical assessments, and without them we can't progress tenures further. Boundary identification requirements. Ben has already provided you with some information this morning on boundary identification. This is more of a kindly reminder that accurate area description and details have a positive impact on the assessment of your applications. I've provided a link in the PowerPoint to the practice direction for boundary identification. You can always refer to this document for assistance. And there's a photo there of what mining pegs should look like. That's an example taken straight out of the practice direction. Background and adjoining land. I've provided some illustrations detailing what accurate background and adjoining land should look like on new applications. It is important to have accurate background and adjoining land details as it will assist with the mining claim or mining lease public notification process. The applicant is required to provide all affected persons with copies of the notice and appropriate attachment. It is important that these documents are sent to the correct address of the affected person, as this is their opportunity to object to the application. So having all the correct, details and stuff like that really helps during that process, so we don't have to go back to people. People sort of have to go back and find that additional information, I should say. Just bear with me while I'm trying to get this slide. Let's go to the next one. Right, renewal applications for production permits. I would like to take this opportunity to remind everyone that it is in the holder's best interest to be aware of their expiry date and ready to address their renewal in an appropriate manner. Lodging applications at the holder's earliest convenience gives the holder the best chance of having an appropriate and accurate application lodged. We do not want our clients missing out on further permit terms due to avoidable circumstances. Sorry guys, I'm just trying to get to this next slide. Yep. Renewal application documents. Just like new applications, providing appropriate documents at the time of renewal ensures that applications can be accessed and accepted appropriately. The documents I've listed here on the slides are important as we cannot accept renewal applications with insufficient information. Remember that we are assessing these applications for a further renewal term. Therefore, we request updated information for our assessments. Referring to old documents from previous lodgements is not really appropriate for the new proposed terms. Notifying interested parties of renewal applications. This is a quick one to keep in mind. It is important to remember that mining lease and mining claim holders must notify the affected persons within 5 business days of a renewal application being lodged. We do have instances where landholders will advise us that they have never received notification that a renewal was happening on a tenure. This is something to be aware of as it is a requirement under the Mineral Resources Act. Compliance checks on renewal applications. Our assessment officers will conduct compliance checks on renewal applications as part of the renewal process. If you think something might be outstanding, it would be beneficial to address these before the renewal application comes in, as it encourages an efficient assessment process. It is important to remember that the holder should always ensure their tenure is in good standing and compliant. Transfer applications and dealings. Our next topic is transfer applications and dealings. I've listed some items on the slide to keep in mind when lodging transfer applications and other dealings. evidence showing authorization of individuals signing the application, appropriate identification for individuals and companies, stamp duty evidence, and further after that I'll go through some mining claim specific transfer requirements. It is important to keep in mind that the appropriate signatures and signature authorities are provided when lodging these types of applications. It is beneficial to ensure that all information is provided with the application so that the appropriate checks can be made. Our assessment officers check that the company ID or personal ID match the resource authority applicant or proposed holder. Applications cannot be accepted without correct signatures and authorizations. Stamp duty evidence and registered suitable operator numbers. As you all should be aware, assessable transfers are required to be assessed by the Office of State Revenue before being lodged with the Department for assessment and approval. The most appropriate evidence that an OSR assessment has been completed is a stamped application. If there is no stamped application provided, please ensure that if there is no stamp provided on the application, please ensure that there is a reference to the assessment completed by OSR. Sometimes they'll send a receipt or something like that, and that's more than acceptable. This will be sufficient for lodging applications. We also recommend that the applicant applies for a registered suitable operator number as soon as possible, if required for the transfer assessment. Next slide. Mining claim specific transfer requirements. For those of you who deal with mining claim transfers on a regular basis, it is important to be aware that mining claim transfers must be accompanied by a work program completed by the incoming holder. We also include the self-assessment security calculator as part of the work program. This is the applicant's opportunity to review and understand how their security deposits are calculated. This calculator is a self-assessment only. The amount of security will be determined by the Minister under Section 22 of the Mineral and Energy Common Provisions Act 2014. Thanks everyone for listening to me, and hopefully that wasn't too boring. I really appreciate all the work you do for our clients, and I'm sure they do too. You're more than welcome to reach out to me anytime and have a chat or email me, and I'll hand back to Warren now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Xavier. I'll just ask again, if anybody has any questions, please type them into the chat. We're more than happy to take them on board and provide a response if we can at the end of this forum. And if, like I said in my post, if we can't, we'll certainly make sure that you receive a response to that. Next up, we have Doug Morrison, who's a senior geologist in the Mineral Assessment Hub. Doug studied geology at the University of KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa before moving to Australia in 1988. Following a 5-year stint as an exploration geologist in Western Australia and the Northern Territory, Doug undertook additional studies in Darwin based on geographic information systems and remote sensing. He has filled a number of different roles as a GIS expert in industry and government agencies, and in 2007, Doug moved back into the exploration space, including 9 years a GIS geological consultant providing project management services to exploration companies throughout Queensland. Doug joined the Mineral Assessment Hub in 2016 as part of the technical assessment team, where in his role he oversees technical assessment of mining lease applications, renewals and other dealings. Doug firmly believes in developing the state's mineral resources to the benefit of all Queenslanders, has been integral to the rollout of the mineral development plans. Thank you, Doug.
Wow, thanks, Warren. Welcome, everyone. I look forward to hearing your feedback and any questions at the end of the session. As Warren mentioned, I am currently overseeing technical assessments relating to all of the production permits in the state. I'm also the lead for the workflow planning and processes for the assessment of and progression of mineral development plans. So I'm going to be talking about development plans today with a focus on the technical aspects of it and the approvals process. Just a quick note, I guess going back to one of Xavier's slides, as the technical assessor for production permits in relation to financial and technical documents, I'd just like to say that can you please ensure that when you do lodge in, documents for financial and technical capability, that there is also a document that covers the evidence for your financial and technical capability. Let's move on to the next slide. So I've got a half a dozen slides or so. In these slides, I want to try and give you guys a clear understanding of, I guess, the why of development plans. And when I give you an understanding of when a development planner is required, and I guess what's involved in ensuring a complete initial development plan is submitted. So I'll be running through these slides, which hopefully give you context for the development plans, what triggers them, and how the new amendments deal with them. And I'll make some good suggestions, hopefully, around making a good IDP application. Why development plans? Well, they came in with the new legislation that was enacted in September 2020. So I guess that really covers the why. And when they came in, I must admit that we, like many of you, I'm sure, felt a bit intimidated. It was easy to look over the fence at coal, where development plans have been a staple for many years, and say, well, it's okay for you. You understand the resource. It's easy. The coal's shallow and it's flat. It's pretty easy to work out how much of it there is. Whereas minerals in Queensland are so varied, and so are the mining projects that have developed them. But when you break it down for any of the bigger mines, a mine plan or a feasibility study is almost always required to allow a decision to mine to go ahead. That's because you've got a managing director or a board or even a bank that won't give you the green light until they have a document that tells them that the project will be profitable. And so that's where things like a feasibility study come into play. Perhaps all of the elements that you need for a development plan are actually contained within these documents. And so despite the wide and varied nature of the minerals mining sector, perhaps it's not so difficult after all. Copy and paste might work. I'm going to share my learnings with you as I've now done a number of development plans or assessed a number of development plans. I'm going to hopefully shine a light on where the legislative amendments can seem a little bit complicated and guide you towards the tools that will help you lodge a good application. Before I go on, I will just let you know that I am running a bit of a quiz. So on the right-hand side of these slides is a satellite image of some of Queensland's current mining operations. So the quiz is whether you can work out what the mine site is before you get the answer. So hopefully you've all got that already. That's Pachingo. Okay, so what's the triggers for a development plan? Now, there's a couple of things you need to take into account here. The first of the triggers is whether you cross a particular threshold for a mineral. That's the threshold of production in any 1 year. And then the other part of the equation is the actual mining leases where that threshold is reached. So the first part of this is the thresholds, and this is the table that comes straight out of our minerals, the mineral resources regulation. which then gives you the different thresholds. So, for example, if you were to produce 100 kilos of gold in a financial or calendar year, then that would trigger the requirement for a development plan. And the reason why they're in the regulations is so that it's a little bit easier for us to amend them if we need to. Perhaps a new mineral is discovered and we need to add that to the threshold. The mine on the right-hand side is the Thalanga Base Metals plant. Currently, most of the ore is actually being produced off the leases at Thalanga, although there are still remaining resources there. And as I said before, there are two different sides to the equation. So you've been producing mineral, I hope, on a mining lease, because otherwise you'd be not doing the right thing. And you've met the threshold. So now, what are we calling the MLs? Well, mineral becomes a prescribed mineral once you meet the threshold, and the mining leases that are involved in that particular operation where that mineral is being mined then become prescribed mineral mining leases. So for a development plan for that to be triggered, so I'll just read it off. Mineral mining leases individually or within a project that meet the threshold for production must have an approved development plan. So that comes out of our guidelines. If it's a new mine and there's a new mining lease application, well, then the rule's slightly different. If you reach that threshold in any one of the first 5 years of the life of that mining lease, then you need to apply for a development plan upon application of the mining lease. Hopefully that's been clear enough for everyone. So this slide just covers a little bit about some of the things that I found a little bit complicated in the transitional arrangements as we go from what was before to now what is development plans in the legislation. And I think to try and capture this slide in plain English, I think what this slide and the guideline is trying to convey that basically if you've got a current mining project that's hit the threshold any time between the period September 2020 to December 2023, then the transitional arrangements are in play. On the other hand, if you had a mining lease application that was in play in September 2020, it gets granted and you've reached the threshold between 2020 and 2023, then the transitional arrangements are also in play. And the transitional arrangements, I guess, to put it really simply, is a development plan gets triggered if a renewal is applied for in the first instance, or the transitional period ends. I think that's really captures what that section of the legislation, the transitional arrangements, is trying to capture. Happy to take any questions on that. Just wait while this slide. Oh, yes, and I should just go back. I guess this is just the experience of the hub up until now. It's sort of a logical kind of progression that, any development plans applications that we're receiving are naturally being triggered by a renewal application. And I don't know how many we will get as we get closer to the end of the transitional period. So that would be for all current projects where there has been no renewal application for any of the leases. I don't know how many of those we're going to get. It would be an interesting little study for me to do, Warren. Okay, so let's move on to your first initial development plan application. I feel like a lot of the agents in the room have probably already done one or two of these. However, it might be your first that's coming up soon, and to help you we have developed a guideline, and we've also developed a template. Please use them. The template is designed quite carefully to follow the requirements of the legislation, and there's some pretty good handy tips and hints in the template to allow you to get through that. I must say, we have received fairly positive feedback on the template, on the updated version of it. And I just really need to underline the fact that your development plan, once it's approved, is a legal document. It becomes a condition of grant of your lease or the project. We also strongly advise that you have executive sign-off from your client or your company. For example, a development plan which was approved recently, when the document writer realised the implications of the IDP being a condition of lease, had the draft document scrutinised by their legal department before passing through their executive officer for approval before lodging the actual final document with us. And that was after it had been through a sort of a Q&A between me and the document writer. A note on the look and feel of the document. All of the VIPs internally are going to read it. Obviously we all operate under confidentiality, but that includes the minister as well. He will read it. So check your spelling, your formatting, fonts, everything. Glossy document is what we're looking for, I think. That's the Mount Carlton gold silver mine. I've deliberately not gone into too much detail into what the contents of the actual template looks like. The guideline and the template is there for you guys to work through. But I did just quickly take a snip of the index out of the template, because I wanted to just focus on parts 4 and 5 of the document. There's 2 separate sections, and this is requirement under the legislation. You've got a section that talks about the mining activities. It's not the amount of mineral that you're mining. The section's asking you, that particular section's asking you to tell us about the mining activities, the development of infrastructure, haul roads, waste, ore being moved, the amount of ore itself being moved by all means. But the resource information, the grade that's being produced, that comes in the separate section under the part 5 of the document. So please try not to get the 2 confused. We're getting grade and resource estimates in part 4, when it really should come in with part 5. And I can see that people are actually getting confused when they submit those documents. Happy to answer any questions on that as well. So getting back to your first initial development plan application, look, we understand for many of you this might be your first go. Totally understand. It's very much I guess a two-way street. I've fielded so many calls from holders and AHRs on the subject, so I get it. My experience is that if we work together, we'll get to the end quicker. Get in touch early. So I guess as we go down the track, we're probably going to go into a bit more formally into sort of a pre-lodgement situation. But for the time being, get in touch early. Share your drafts as an editable document, such as a Word document, so we can use track changes to polish it up and make sure that it's fit for purpose. And that would be before it goes to your, to your chief executive or someone to sign off. Just a note. The IDP is progressed as part of the technical assessment. However, the actual approval of the IDP won't be given until the grant of the actual ML, so the renewal or the application of the ML that triggered it. And that's it for me. Hopefully that has shone a bit of a light on development plans for those that haven't been involved in them to date. And for those that have, hopefully it's kind of confirmed some of the stuff that you've already worked on. Thanks, Warren.
Thanks, Doug. Next up, we have Julie Hookey, Senior Project Officer, Land and Surveying Services. Julie has been with the Department of Resources for 22 years, initially working with the Lands Division processing Land Act dealings before moving to Native Title Services in 2016. Julie is a Senior Project Officer where she is responsible for Native Title assessment and project management of the rights to negotiate process. Her work is spread over all tenure types across coal, mineral and the petroleum hubs. Julie's experience enables her to manage negotiations to reach agreements that will meet the requirements of the legislation, the parties as a part of that negotiation and the state. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you, Warren. Good morning, all. Native title. Australian law recognises that Indigenous people have rights and interests in land under their traditional laws and customs. The Native Title Act 1993 Commonwealth sets out specific processes that must be followed on any future act on land or waters that would affect the native title rights and interests. Applications for most resource authorities are considered future acts and are subject to native title processes. Topics which I am covering today are department realignment, the right to negotiate, expedited procedure, native title advertising fee, and helpful tips. So with the department realignment, we recently changed our structure and Native Title Services has moved across to the Lands Division. We are a team of 8 with a wealth of knowledge and experience located in 3 different locations across the state, Mareeba, Rockhampton and Brisbane. Our contact details have not changed and we continue to deliver our services as we currently do. The right to negotiate. Getting a little too quick happy here. The native title process requirements. Please make sure to submit the right to negotiate submission when you're lodging your application where you have selected the right to negotiate as your native title option. By not providing the right to negotiate submission, this will cause delays to the commencement of the native title process as we will need to follow up lodgement of the right to negotiate submission with you. Mediation with the National Native Title Tribunal. Future Act mediation can be requested through the National Native Title Tribunal by any party involved in the right to negotiate process, any party being the grantee party, the Native Title Party, or the government party. The National Native Title Tribunal will appoint a mediator to assist the parties to identify issues, develop options, and consider alternatives to reach an agreement. Mediation can be conducted via phone, video conferencing, in person, or a combination of 3. For further information, please refer to the National Native Title Tribunal website at www.nntt.gov.au. There's a lot of useful information, not just about the Future Act mediation. You can find information also on there about native title determination claims. So good faith negotiation. What constitute good faith negotiations? The law requires all parties to negotiate in good faith. This is with an open mind and a genuine desire to reach an agreement. Examples of good faith negotiation include, but not limited to, initiating communications and making proposals in the first instance, take reasonable steps to facilitate and engage in discussions with parties, provide the information to parties in reasonable timeframes, make counter proposals, hold negotiating meetings with the appropriate delegate of people, follow up responses, and do what any reasonable person would do in the circumstances. Future Act Determination Application. A Future Act determination is made by the National Native Title Tribunal about whether a future act attracting the right to negotiate process may be done subject to conditions, or must not be done. The requirements for lodging a Future Act determination application are at least 6 months has passed since the notification day. The negotiating parties have not obtained the agreement of each of the native title parties to the doing of the Future Act, and the application is lodged with the National Native Title Tribunal by a party to negotiations about the Future Act. Expedited procedure. Changes to the expedited procedure process. The National Native Title Tribunal has introduced a new process to foster early engagement between the parties to support better agreement making, encourage a more effective use of parties' resources, while promoting efficient management and resolution of matters before the tribunal. What does this mean in practice? And once an objection is lodged with the National Native Title Tribunal, the member will set directions. If the parties have not resolved the objection or withdrawn the objection by the 4-month notification period, the member will review the matter to determine if the original direction set remains suitable. Where parties are close to resolution, the member may extend the direction timetable, or where the matter is to proceed to determination, the member may extend the period of compliance for the directions. MyMinesOnLine Native Title Assessment. Enhancements were introduced to MyMinesOnLine last year to remove the requirement for payment of native title advertising fee over areas associated with determined native title land. When completing the native title assessment steps in MyMinesOnLine as part of your application lodgement, ensure to review the information within the table which is circled in red. This provides an indication of the native title status of the background land tenure in your application area. As you can see here, the application being lodged is over land which includes land subject to native title, a native title claim determination, and Indigenous land use agreement. This information should be verified in GeoRes Globe to identify the extent of which these areas overlap your application. Native title payment fee selection. Where an application is wholly within a determined native title claim or partly within a determined native title claim and the balance area is exclusive land, please select the following options as circled in red. The application is wholly within a determined claim area and the native title determined land advertisement is $0. This will avoid the requirement to pay the advertising fee. But please note, this option is not applicable for a native title claim application. It is only for a native title determination. By choosing no advertisement fee when a public notification is required, this again will delay the commencement of the native title process. To verify the layers in GeoRes Globe, you can do this by selecting the relevant layers, such as the native land subject to native title and the determined native title claim as shown circled here in red. Scenario 1 is an example which is covered by land subject to native title, which is the pink layer, and native title claim determination, which is a blue dashed diagonal line going from left to right. Scenario 2 is an example of an area which is covered by exclusive land and native title determination, which is a blue diagonal line going from left to right. You will note that the exclusive land layer has no identifier. Helpful tips. To assist the native title process being progressed as quickly as possible, please to ensure to select the correct native title process. If you are unsure, please contact us to help work through. Note, there is no state negotiated Indigenous land use agreements which can be deeded into. The previously negotiated agreements only allow for renewal of existing resource authorities granted under the agreement for the same terms for renewal. Any resource authority granted under alternative state provisions will require a new native title process at renewal. Where a native title process is required for an application for excluded land or a renewal for a longer term, payment of the advertising fee should be made with lodgement of the application as required. And finally, ensure to provide native title services with monthly updates for any application currently subject to native title negotiations. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Next up, we have Carlye Sycz, Executive Director of Reform, for an update on the Queensland Resources Industry Development Plan. Carlye is the reform lead for the Department of Resources, and the department's reform agenda is focused on enabling economic development and to become more influential in whole of government economic policy development. Carlye has 15 years of experience in the Queensland government, focusing on strategic policy development and reform, most recently in the energy and resources policy spaces. Carlye's experience also spans across the resources industry and community engagement, as well as sustainable development. And thank you very much, Carlye, for making yourself available for this forum. Very much appreciated.
Thank you so much, Warren.
Over to you then.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. As Warren mentioned, I am Carlye Sycz, very funnily spelt Polish name there. I'm Executive Director of the Reform Unit in the Department of Resources. And I'm here today to just give a bit of a rundown on the Queensland Resources Industry Development Plan. You may have seen the draft plan, which was released in November last year. So we're kind of at the moment in a furious, frantic mode of trying to finalise the plan, and we're hopeful that that will be out in mid-year. But I'll give you a bit of a rundown of the draft plan and the process we've undertaken so far in anticipation for the Q&A session that we'll have after this. Let me just check. Just trying to advance the slides. There we go. That's me. So the Queensland Resources Industry Development Plan came out of an election commitment from the Queensland government. And the aim for the plan was to really develop a plan for growth for the resources industry. We took that commitment and really tried to unpack what that meant for the sector, and settled on, we wanted to really think about a plan for the next 30 years for the industry. And, really thinking about that, we wanted to make sure that we spoke to a lot of stakeholders, as many stakeholders as we possibly could. So really, when we were developing the plan, we wanted to focus on consultation and co-design as much as we could. So we undertook 2 rounds of consultation. One kicked off about a year ago. I think actually we had our first forum on the 27th of April last year. So that's a nice kind of bookend for this presentation. So, we've had sessions in resource communities across the state. We went to talk to people and canvass their ideas about what they thought they should see in the plan if we're talking about a plan for 30 years. We also ran a couple of submission rounds, and I know a lot of your companies and potentially yourselves contributed to those rounds. So I'd like to say thank you so much, because it really gave us a good idea about, what's really impacting the sector at the moment. What are you seeing in your day-to-day? But also, what do you think we should be tackling, for the next 30 years of the industry? We also undertook, industry and community dedicated stakeholder working groups. And we sought some expert analysis by going out to ask particular questions around, if we're looking at the kind of the end-to-end processes that we undertake in the resources space in terms of approvals. Obviously, that's not just the Department of Resources, that's also the Department of Environment and Science, as well as, Office of the Coordinator General. But there's lots of different ways that the Queensland Government engages with the resources industry. So we wanted to make sure that that was as streamlined as possible, and really doing what we thought it needed to do for the future. And we also had a look at the effectiveness of government support to the resources sector at the moment. So all of that, we settled on a vision for the draft Queensland Resources Development Plan, which is a resilient, responsible and sustainable Queensland resources industry that grows as it transforms. And the transformation piece there is the really critical part of that vision, because we understand that the resources sector isn't going to be the same in 30 years as it is today. We're already seeing a lot of those changes happen at the moment, and we want to make sure that we're ready to face those challenges and those opportunities as well, and really make sure that Queensland has a thriving resources sector in 30 years and it's contributing to Queensland's economy. So I know this is a really busy slide, but this is effectively kind of the plan on a page for the resources industry development plan. And I know some of you may have engaged with the document. For those that haven't, I've got a link later on in my slides. The full version is quite chunky. It's about 100 pages, but this is really kind of an overarching view of what is in the plan. So in the plan, we talk about, obviously emerging global trends, things that are impacting the resource sector now, but are also, pretty near term in terms of what their impact on the industry will be. Things like decarbonisation, obviously not a surprise to anybody listening on the call. That's going to reshape commodity demand and is already reshaping commodity demand as the world looks to address climate change. Corporate social responsibility is really about how investors and consumers are increasingly making different decisions than they have in the past, seeking more ethical investments and products. And together we have been kind of terming those two concepts ESG, and many of you will be aware of ESG, but obviously environmental, social and governance considerations. Scarcity and complexity of access to quality resources is the third one there, which is really about companies shifting their business models from mineral extraction to material handling, particularly in a circular economy, but also, the quick and easy deposits are gone. We're not going to see, kind of big, well, in many instances, it's going to be, smaller deposits, smaller mines in the future. So how do we shift to make sure that we're tackling that and understanding those opportunities? 4 and 5 there are really about Queensland being a trade exposed economy and not making a lot of decisions about our exports ourselves. So, the Indo-Pacific is going to be an increasing consumer base for us into the future. But geopolitics is a real opportunity, and we've been seeing that as part of COVID about the reliability of supply chains and making sure that, we have we're embracing that opportunity that provides to Queensland, because we really think that other markets will favour Queensland's reputation, a safe, secure, reliable place to source minerals and commodities from. And we really want to make sure we're driving onshoring of supply chains as part of that. And emerging innovations there is about, obviously making mining safer, being more productive and digitally focused, as well as creating opportunities in the met sector, and having a think about what changing patterns of employment will look like. So the middle bar there is the key focus areas or the kind of chapters for the plan in the draft plan that we've got out. So pretty self-explanatory, but I'll just give a quick run through as well as some of the actions that we've got in for each chapter at the moment. So growing and diversifying the industry is really about taking advantage of the world's growing demand for new economy minerals, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a second, and really understanding what the opportunity is for Queensland in that. So driving value down the supply chain to make sure we're onshoring as much as we can in Queensland and not just being a quarry and shipping off our materials for the world to manufacture. Second chapter there or focus area is about strengthening our ESG credentials. So the trends I mentioned before and making sure that we're really we're ready to embrace that opportunity for Queensland, and also about protecting the environment. So really making sure that we're environmentally responsible. Our regulatory regime is really fit for purpose for ESG and that trend moving forward, because we know that global investors and consumers are going to direct capital in the way that, environments will need to be ESG ready. Third focus area there is about coexistence and sustainable communities, obviously making sure that the resources sector provides mutual benefits for communities that it's involved in. And that's really about that positive benefit beyond the life of the mine. So, in ecological, social and economic aspects. First Nations partnerships there is, really, it's related to the coexistence piece, but we wanted to particularly highlight the very unique role that First Nations groups have, particularly with the resources sector, where activities happen on country. So really about respecting First Nations people's aspirations and understanding that what we're increasingly seeing is a trend towards things like equity ownership and really driving economic development for First Nations groups and resource companies, making sure that that is again about that positive legacy that extends beyond the life of a mine. So it's not just about footy jerseys and kind of grants here and there or employment as the trainee, but really about how can Indigenous knowledge be embedded at every stage of the resource project. Building a safe and resilient workforce is really about, you know, the criticality of safety for the resources sector. We don't want it, obviously it cannot be subject to profit or productivity considerations. Its safety is paramount for us in the Queensland government. And also about how do we make sure we're providing opportunities to reskill and really attract new people to the resources sector. And improving regulatory efficiency, or the old kind of cutting red tape, is really about how can we attract more investment and have a look at the Queensland government, you know, processes and systems, making sure they're risk-based, efficient and transparent while still protecting the public interest. And we know that the government and industry have a role to play in that. So we think that by kind of hitting all of these things, we'll get to that teal bar down the bottom, which is really about, you know, as I mentioned earlier, the resources industry still being that really critical and fundamental part of the economy that it is today. So we're globally recognised as an ESG leader. You know, we're seen as a supplier of new economy minerals, and we're making a greater contribution to Queensland's economy. And it's still a really employer of choice for people to take up a role and an opportunity. So I wanted to just quickly touch on a really key focus of the plan, which is about new economy minerals. So before, when I was talking about, you know, that the commodity shifting, you know, the plan also talks a little bit about, you know, what does kind of those trends mean for different commodities in Queensland. And we really see that there's a massive opportunity for Queensland in the new economy minerals space, particularly as there are, you know, global commitments to decarbonisation, you know, the net zero target, you know, commitments that are coming out of Glasgow. The Queensland government obviously also has a net zero target, and so does the Australian government. And new economy minerals are critical to be able to reach those decarbonisation targets, and Queensland has an abundance of them. So this is obviously the ones that we know about at this point in time, but we know that there's more. And all of these materials used, and it's a great point, Trenton. Silica should be on the map, and we'll make sure that it's updated for the final. It was a great bit of feedback that we received in the draft, so silica was an omission, and we apologise for that one. Silica is a classic new economy mineral, right? You know, you need it for smartphones and lots of things moving forward. As well as, you know, all the other ones that I've got listed there as well. Not an extensive and exclusive list. We know that there are more new economy minerals. It's just a kind of a bit of a snapshot about what is in Queensland at the moment. As I say, that's just what we know about. So, you know, there's a massive opportunity for Queensland as part of this to really kind of grab it with both hands and become a world-class and a world leader in the supply of new economy minerals. And the other thing I'll mention quickly is, you know, I think a lot of time government can put out a report and say, you know, government's going to do these things, or, you know, on the inverse, we want industry to do a lot of things and government doesn't have a role. And what we really wanted to do as part of the Queensland Resources Industry Development Plan was to highlight that these things, you know, we've got a real opportunity for Queensland to be, you know, a world leader in this space, but that doesn't happen if government and industry don't work together. So we want to make sure that, you know, that it really is that true partnership. You know, government has things that it needs to do, but it can't do it alone. So we really want to make sure that we're working with industry. You know, industry has a role to particularly drive some actions in the plan, and there are some actions in the plan that we have flagged for industry to deliver. And it's really by working together that we can achieve that and really, you know, make that massive opportunity for Queensland to be realised. So at the moment, we're just reviewing submissions from the second round of consultation. So we've received about 700 pieces of feedback from this round of consultation. So the team's just kind of furiously going through those. You'll see kind of what we've already done to date. And then we are hopeful that we'll release a final plan by mid next year, which will talk through final actions. At the moment, the draft plan's got 43 draft actions. So we're just working through that feedback to see what people thought about those, whether they hit the mark or there's any gaps. So we can you know, present something to government for their decision and hopefully for release by mid this year. And that is it from me. I know that was a really quick overview, but I'm pretty sure Warren might have a bit of a Q&A session now, so ask me any questions.
Thank you, Carlye. I think one of the things that comes to mind around when we start having discussions around new economy minerals, we use the term new economy minerals within the state because we've taken a view around what those minerals are, especially, and they're the drivers for the new economy, whether it be through solar power, whether it be through batteries and technology. But quite often there's a confusion with other terms that are being used around something like critical minerals, which are generally defined for another reason and basis, or battery minerals. So there's lots of similarities and there's lots of inclusions and exclusions. So for example, a critical mineral for Japan is iron, whereas it's not for us because we have iron in Australia, whereas Japan, they don't have iron ore deposits. So for them, it's a critical mineral for their whole economy. But I think we've taken the view that we're concentrating on what we've termed the new economy minerals, which are important for the way forward going.
That's a great point, Warren. I will just say, sorry, new economy minerals it's probably, we're trying to make it happen in Queensland. So, as you say, often there's conversations around critical minerals or battery minerals. In Queensland, we kind of stick with the new economy minerals because, for example, copper, I don't think anyone would call that necessarily a new, a new minerals or commodity, but it's going to be increasingly critical in the path to decarbonisation. The International Energy Agency, you see the graphs for supply and demand. I think, the world needs 6 times the copper that we know about in terms of established mines at the moment. So that's got to come from somewhere. And obviously, copper is a massive opportunity for Queensland. So, coining the term new economy minerals is to pick up, things that are an established industry in Queensland, but also new opportunities for Queensland as well. So, things like copper and cobalt, we obviously mine already, but then think about the increasing opportunities for things like vanadium and silica, to making sure that, we're really understanding what the economy needs, and Queensland being able to deliver that as much as we can.
Yeah, that's correct. It's a very often discussed matter as to why certain minerals are included or not included. But yeah, so that's good. Okay. I'd like to thank all the presenters for this forum today. One of the things that I'll note is that we are ahead of time. So they've obviously listened to me when I asked them to ensure that they weren't going over time. So they've almost gone the other way and cut time, but that's fine. That certainly allowed for us to have a bit of a Q&A going forward, and certainly it gives us some time to answer any of the questions. And getting to that, one of the things I see in the chat that we've really had only one direct question from Michelle Johnson in relations to title searches for landowners. I would suspect, I know that this is probably a question that we've had a number of times, because when you do a title search through MyMinesOnLine, through an intersection, you'll get the land tenure, and we've certainly had this question around mailing lists or addresses for those owners. If I could, I'd like to throw to one of the team members to try and answer that as best as we can at this point in time, and certainly take on any additional questions in regard to that matter. So, Beck Youngbury, are you available to provide a response to this?
Yeah, thanks, Warren. Michelle, yes, a title search will only give you the name of the landowners. So what you really want is a QVAS search. And I've been trying to rack my brains to remember what QVAS stands for. It's Queensland Valuations and something, but you'll get it from the same team that give you your title searches. So that will give you the registered address for service for that land parcel. I know someone else did suggest that local governments will provide that information. In my experience, not all local governments will provide that for you. So you're best off going straight to the land's customer service team for it.
Thanks, Beck. If there's any follow on from that, Michelle, please don't hesitate to contact directly. I think that's something that we can look at and try to determine the best way or whether there's options there. Look, from looking at the chat, one of the things that I'm seeing is that in regard to Darren's question around this format for this forum, and it's very clear, I think, from the responses that there's a strong preference for this online because of just the physical locations of people, and I think that's a very valid point. So what I'd like to do is one, before I throw to Darren, because I'd like to give Darren an opportunity to have a chat and also put the closing comments, I suppose. But one of the things I want people to remind people is this session is recorded and will be the link to this recording will be sent to all people on the list who enrolled for the forum, and it'll be up on the website. By all means, if you have think of any questions in the next day or so, by all means, get back onto the chat and type it in, because we'll monitor that for a day or so. So people might need just a bit of time to think about things or suddenly realise afterwards that they had a question. So please come in, put them on. We'll monitor that, and at a point we'll provide some responses to any of the questions there, along with the link to the recording. So, Darren, can I throw to you for some comments? And if there's no questions coming up, right? I see there are some coming up now.
There's a few there now, Warren. So maybe I'll have some comments, and the team can turn their mind to those questions, and then we might work through those. See that John's got one there, John Greaves, and Richard Smith. And a question there for Carlye as well, in relation to the draft plan. Look, so probably from my perspective, I've been here all morning, and I've been equally impressed, Warren, with the breadth of topics that the team's covered, and the fact that there hasn't been a plethora of questions coming through means that the team's hitting the mark. So congratulations on that. Even despite the fact that I've encouraged the team on the chat there to give you some evil questions, there hasn't really been any forthcoming. So I think we'll have to try harder in extracting some difficult questions for you. So well done. But to the rest of the participants, please genuinely use the opportunity to ask us those difficult questions. Give us the frank feedback. That's what we need. That's how we drive a better service. A bit of feedback from me around the minerals hub is that team has got a large volume of work that comes through it, the highest of any of the hubs in terms of petroleum and gas or coal. Great diversity of what comes through there, as you might expect, everything from quite small operations through to large-scale bauxite and copper operations. And for the person who raised a comment before about silica and silica sands, absolutely more and more of that. Also keen for feedback around the topics that we're actually pitching. Are we pitching the right topics? Are we pitching them at the right level? Are we covering enough technical stuff with enough policy type input to suit what your needs actually are? Going back to that question, Warren, around online or face-to-face, I think clearly online's the way for us to go. I'm not real keen on a sort of a blended option because, as I said in the chat, people who are online tend to feel like they got left behind. When we're all online, we're kind of all on equal footing, so it kind of works. But if we've got another forum where people are coming together, we might drop one of these onto the back of it if we're going to get a good roll up in terms of people being available face to face. Look, the team in terms of the Mineral Hub, absolutely great group of people who will do their absolute best for you in terms of advocating in the public interest for getting projects up and running. The interest in the mineral space, I think, is probably at record highs. Exploration is extremely strong. The team are getting an exceptional number of applications coming through at the moment, which we're turning around very, very quickly. So pleased around that. And the hints and tips that the crew have been running through this morning just speeds that process up further. Rightio, have I chatted for long enough to give you a chance to answer those questions, Warren?
Well, yes, I have. But first of all, I see there's a couple of people with hands up in the list of attendees. So I might, we've got the time. We might go to those people. So first is David Peterson. If he wishes to, if you'd like to, ask a question, feel free to do so. I believe you'll be unmuted.
Yes. Just a question for Carlye around the removal of small-scale mining from the mining legislation, which was proposed in the draft plan. Is there anything more developed with that? And can you give us some idea of the thinking behind that actual decision?
Yeah, no worries. Thanks so much for the question. As you flagged, the draft plan does flag that the Queensland government wants to examine the way that small-scale mining is regulated and looked after into the future. So at the moment, what we've done is what we've said, while we kind of investigate those options, we'll implement a moratoria for any new small-scale mining claims. So it doesn't impact the rights of small-scale miners who currently have a claim and are currently mining under that framework. But we just wanted to make sure that the regulatory framework was fit for purpose. So in anticipation of that, we just implemented the moratoria so we don't have a situation where there might be differing rights. And then at the moment, the department is looking at a couple of different options around that. And we expect that the final will give a little bit more information around what those options are in anticipation of any decision. So we'll make sure that there's consultation throughout that, and we have been talking with the department's been talking with small-scale mining groups as well as local governments that have a big small-scale mining industry to make sure that those issues are all fully being considered before we make a decision on that, and that will be consultation and ongoing communication after any decision is made.
Okay, I live in Ruby Vale. I've got a small-scale mine that I live on, and the only small-scale mining group that we have out here is the Sapphire Miners Association.
Yep.
And we've had a couple public meetings now, and they've made mention on numerous occasions that they haven't had any consultation from you, that they've tried to, on numerous occasions, have consultations with you and get no response from your office at all. You've spoken about the consultation rounds, and I'm pleased to hear that so many people have put queries into that. But
including the Sapphire Miners Association as well as other small-scale mining associations as well, David, because we and I know that there was separate surveys and consultation pieces that your stakeholder groups and peak bodies put out for you. So we do have all of that information in terms of, I think, when I mentioned the 700 pieces of feedback, I think a lot of those are from small-scale miners. So we definitely are hearing the feedback from you and your community on this. So sorry to jump in. I just wanted to flag that we have also got submissions from them.
I just want to make you aware of the fact that, you've got to be aware of the fact that the decisions you're making in your office, wherever that is affects thousands of people who've got their entire lives out here. In 12 months, when you decide to implement this plan, am I still going to have a mine to call my own, or is this? What does this going forward? What does removing small-scale mining mean to the people who own those mines?
Yeah, no, it's definitely a very important consideration for us, and please don't take that. We know that this has a day-to-day impact on people out in the ground, and that's not obviously our intention to do anything without understanding and considering what those implications will be, which is exactly why the recommendation is written in the way that it is. We haven't made any decisions yet. We're flagging that we want to have a look at this issue and investigate it, and have a look at what those implications would be if we change the regulatory framework. So there's been no decision to do that yet, but we just wanted to flag that that's obviously something that we are thinking about, which is why it's written in the way that it is for the draft plan. And I don't want this to sound like buck passing, but it's the small mining particular action is not something that is my team specifically doesn't look after it. So I'm not exactly sure of the ins and outs and the communication with the Ruby Vale community as well as the Sapphire Miners Association. But I will commit to following that up with you, and I can get information back through to Warren and Darren to let you know what the latest is there. But I know that the group and the team that are looking after it are very committed to the stakeholder engagement and to making sure that we're talking to the community as much as we can. So I can take that away and get some information back through Warren and Darren to yourself.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, I see there's another hand up there from a Happy Marcos. If we can unmute, we're happy to take your question. I'm sorry, we can't, I don't appear to be able to hear you there. If yes, there must be some issue there with the audio. So please, by all means, type something in so that we can provide a response directly back to you. Okay. Darren.
Oh, sure. So look, I'd like to thank everyone for being here today. I'm just looking at my text. In terms of, David, that question in relation to the small scale mining stuff, we'll absolutely get back to you on that. The team's already chatting with me around that, so that's great. Look, I'd again like to thank everyone for dividing the time in terms of both the departmental staff and also all of the participants who've taken time out of your day to actually join us today. The feedback in the comments there is really strong around us doing this more often and continuing to do it. So we'll certainly take that on board. As I said earlier, please give us a heads up on topics that you'd like us to cover. Happy to really shape the forum so it actually meets the needs of you. That's the intent. That's why we do it. And that's also why I've been asking the questions around whether the format's right. So congratulations and thank you everyone. And at that point, I think we'll sign off. So thank you, Warren.
Well, thanks, Darren. And again, I just want to reiterate, any questions, please put them into the chat. I see there's a number of them coming in. We will respond to them, and by all means, if individuals wish to call the hub and talk one-on-one, feel free to do so. We're very keen to make sure that we have a strong working relationship with our clients who are in the resources sector. So thank you, Darren. Thank you to all the presenters. I see that there's some very strong support for this forum moving forward. So by all means, we will ensure that everybody's made aware of when the next one is coming up. And as Darren said, please, if you have any specific areas that you'd like us to cover off on that better informs the information we're able to supply, please let us know. But anybody who's registered for this event will receive a link to the recording and also information in regard to any of the questions that have been asked. So if there's nothing else, I'll just check that there's no more hands up. No, they've all come down. So that's great. Thank you very much. And again, please do not hesitate to contact the Mineral Hub if there's anything we can do. Thank you for attending.